The door closes with a dull echo that does not fade quickly. For many people, this is the quietest moment they will ever experience, and also the most decisive. A tray slides through a narrow slot. No voices, no eye contact, just the first meal inside the most secure prison in the United States. It is simple, controlled, and delivered according to rules designed for maximum safety. For the new arrival, it is also a message. Life here will be predictable, restricted, and closely managed. What does that first meal reveal about how life begins inside ADX Florence? And why is every small detail so carefully planned? This documentary examines what happens when someone first arrives at ADX Florence, the federal administrative maximum facility in Colorado, often referred to as the highest security federal prison in the United States. We will look at how the first hours unfold, what that first meal represents, and how the design of daily life shapes behavior over time. Everything in this documentary is based on real, verified information from documented reports, court records, official statements, and credible journalism. The goal is education and historical understanding, not sensationalism or glorification. This story focuses on systems, procedures, and human consequences, how a prison built for control begins day one with routine, structure, and strict separation. This documentary is for educational and informational purposes only. All content is based on factual, research-driven information from public records, official documents, court filings, and reporting by reputable media and human rights organizations. No information is intentionally fabricated or exaggerated. Before we proceed, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. Transport to ADX Florence ends in layers of doors, identification checks, and controlled movement. By the time an individual reaches their assigned unit, the outside world is already distant. Intake involves confirmation of identity, medical and mental health screening, and the issuing of clothing and basic items, all under supervision. There is no communal dining hall. At ADX, meals are delivered directly to the cell. This is part of the prison's core design. Nearly all daily life occurs inside a single space, with staff interaction limited and structured. For many new arrivals, the first meal is not remarkable in appearance. It is intentionally ordinary, typically standard prison fare, such as a simple entree, sides, or sometimes a basic bag meal, depending on timing. It is delivered through a secure slot, along with utensils designed to meet safety requirements. The process is quiet and brief. The tray comes in. The slot closes. The routine continues. Yet the meaning of that first meal is much larger than the food itself. It marks the beginning of near-total separation. Meals are eaten alone. Movement is scheduled. Communication is limited and monitored. The building itself, thick concrete walls, narrow windows designed to restrict view, and controlled lighting, reinforces that every part of life will be regulated. This first meal also signals the start of what ADX calls controlled housing. Many individuals will spend approximately 23 hours per day in their cells, especially in higher security units. Recreation, showers, medical care, and legal visits exist, but they are structured and supervised. Over time, some individuals may move through step-down programs if they meet specific behavioral criteria, but on day one, nothing is guaranteed. The first meal, then, is not only about food. It is an introduction to a system built around safety, order, and separation. A system designed in response to previous incidents in other prisons where violence and escape planning occurred. As the tray rests on the small surface inside the cell, the unanswered questions begin. How long will this level of isolation last? How will the strict routine shape the days ahead? And how will the person adapt to a place built to minimize movement, sound, and contact? Psychological and system analysis. The design of ADX Florence is intentional. It reflects a correctional philosophy focused on preventing violence inside federal custody and maintaining control over individuals assessed as high risk for serious misconduct or escape in other facilities. Psychologically, the first meal is a symbolic moment of transition from one environment to another. Before arrival, many individuals have experienced jails, transport centers, or high-security prisons where there is at least some interaction with others. ADX reduces that interaction sharply. The message is clear: rules, not negotiation, structure life here. Researchers and legal observers have noted several key effects of such environments. Predictability. Daily routines are highly consistent. This can reduce opportunities for conflict, but may also narrow stimulation. Reduced social contact. Eating alone and spending most hours in a single cell changes how people think about time, communication, and control. Heightened self-monitoring. With privileges tied closely to behavior, individuals must constantly regulate actions and responses. Adaptation or strain. Some adjust through routines such as reading, exercise, or writing. Others may experience stress, anxiety, or withdrawal without adequate support. From a systems perspective, ADX is also shaped by law and oversight. Court cases, inspections, and Department of Justice reviews have influenced policies regarding mental health care, step-down programs, and conditions of confinement. The institution operates under regulations intended to balance safety, humane treatment, and legal obligations. The first meal highlights that balance in a very tangible way. It is safe, standardized, and controlled, not meant as punishment, but as part of an environment where risk management defines daily practice. Nutrition standards must be met, religious diets can be requested following policy, and medical needs are monitored by staff. At the same time, the method of delivery reinforces the core security model: minimal direct contact and maximum supervision. Behavior inside such a system is strongly shaped by those structures. Incentive-based programs, careful documentation, and gradual transition pathways encourage rule following. However, the psychological cost of long-term isolation has been the subject of ongoing debate among scholars, clinicians, courts, and human rights organizations. That debate continues, and it frames how future policies may evolve. The unanswered question remains: how does a person adjust, or struggle to adjust, after the slot closes on that very first tray? After the first meal, the next experience is often silence. Not complete silence, but a controlled environment with limited sound, distant doors, brief staff movements, and occasional announcements. For many new arrivals, the first night is when the reality of ADX Florence becomes fully clear. The cell is designed for safety and durability. Furnishings are secure and built into the structure. A narrow window allows light but offers little outside view. Lighting is regulated. Communication occurs through intercom systems and scheduled interactions, not casual conversation. The new arrival now begins learning the routine. Count times are strict. Meals are delivered at regular intervals. Recreation periods are scheduled in advance and are usually solitary in higher security units. Legal and medical services are available, but each request follows procedure and documentation. Every element of daily life has rules, steps, and limits. The transition can be difficult. In other prisons, daily life might include shared meals, job assignments, or group programs. At ADX, individuality exists mostly inside the cell. Reading materials, letters from approved contacts, and limited personal items become central. Staff monitor mental and physical health, especially during intake, because the first days are considered a period of adjustment. That first night also marks the beginning of assessment. Behavior is observed. Compliance with instructions is recorded. Over time, this record influences housing level and eligibility for step-down programs that gradually increase privileges in lower security units. The process is slow and rule-based rather than automatic. The unanswered question at this stage is not about the facility, but about adaptation. Will the new arrival build routines that help them cope within the rules, or will the strict structure create growing psychological strain? The first night does not answer this. It simply begins the process. In the days following arrival, the system at ADX Florence becomes clearer. It is not only the walls and doors that define life here, but the rules that shape every movement and privilege. Orientation is not a class. It is a process of observation and instruction over time. Written rules explain expectations. Verbal directions from staff reinforce them. Every action, from requesting a book to going to recreation, follows a set procedure. The reasons for these controls are rooted in history. ADX was created after serious incidents in other federal prisons, where individuals organized assaults, coordinated activity across units, or escaped from high-security facilities. ADX is designed to prevent those scenarios through separation and structure. For a new arrival, this translates into clear realities. Recreation is usually alone in a secure area. Interaction with others is limited and monitored. Movement requires restraints and escort in many units. Programs and privileges are earned gradually through behavior. Even small privileges, such as additional reading materials or more phone access, depend on compliance over time. The system is not based on negotiation, but on documented conduct. Meals continue to mark the rhythm of the day. The tray slot opens, food is passed through, and the slot closes. This routine removes the social element normally associated with eating. Instead, meals become part of a schedule that reinforces structure and predictability. Psychologically, this environment demands internal discipline. Without large group settings or jobs to organize the day, time is shaped by personal routine. Exercise in the cell, writing, reading, or structure programs offered through secure methods. Mental health professionals may conduct assessments or treatment according to policy, especially when signs of distress appear. Some individuals respond by becoming highly organized, using schedules and small goals to maintain focus. Others may struggle with boredom, anxiety, or the absence of regular conversation. The system is designed to reduce risk, but it also requires strong coping strategies to handle long periods of solitude. A major turning point comes when a new arrival learns about the step-down process. This program allows gradual transition to less restrictive conditions if specific behavioral criteria are consistently met. It offers a pathway, but not a guarantee. Progress is reviewed, documented, and can take years. At this stage, a central question forms. How will the person respond to a place where nearly every privilege is tied to long-term behavior? The answer will shape how the years ahead unfold inside ADX. But in these early days, the outcome is still uncertain. Once the rules are understood, another reality settles in. Life at ADX Florence is deeply separated from the outside world. The first meal signaled isolation inside the cell. The first attempts at communication reveal how carefully outside contact is controlled. Mail is permitted, but it is screened according to federal regulations. Outgoing and incoming letters are checked for security concerns, except for protected legal correspondence, which follows special handling rules. Phone calls are limited, scheduled, and monitored, with exceptions for legal communication. Visits are possible, but they are non-contact and highly structured, usually through glass barriers or secure video systems. For new arrivals, this means that family contact still exists, but within strict boundaries and often with long intervals. Many people experience a delay between arrival and their first conversation with someone outside, simply because approvals and procedures must be completed first. Communication restrictions are not arbitrary. They were designed to prevent coordination of criminal activity from inside prison and to protect staff, the public, and other incarcerated people. Over the years, court rulings and policy reviews have shaped how these rules are applied, balancing security with constitutional rights. Psychologically, this stage is significant. The awareness that contact is limited but not eliminated creates a complex response. For some, letters and occasional calls become key emotional anchors and motivators for good behavior. For others, distance from family or community increases feelings of isolation or loss. Mental health services exist to evaluate and treat individuals who show serious symptoms, and policies have evolved over time to expand those services for people with diagnosed conditions. Daily life continues to revolve around routine. Meals through the slot, counts and security checks, scheduled recreation periods, occasional meetings with staff or clinicians. Monitor communication with approved contacts. Each of these reinforces the same message. Control, predictability, and documentation define the environment. A turning point often occurs when a new arrival realizes that time itself becomes structured differently. Days are measured not by events, but by routines. Progress is gradual and tied almost entirely to conduct and compliance. This understanding can motivate careful adherence to rules, or for some, it can deepen frustration with the lack of personal control. The unanswered question now extends beyond the first meal or the first night. It becomes larger. How does a person maintain identity, relationships, and mental balance in a setting where nearly every form of communication is filtered through policy? The next phase of life at ADX will test that question in practice as the step-down system and long-term adjustment begin to take shape. As weeks turn into months, the central question at ADX Florence becomes progress. The first meal marked the beginning. Now, life is measured by steady behavior and documented reviews. The step-down system is the primary path out of the most restrictive units. It is not automatic and not guaranteed. It is based on policy, evaluations, and sustained compliance with rules over time. Movement through the program can eventually lead to units with slightly more interaction or, in some cases, transfer to other high-security prisons with fewer restrictions. For someone newly arrived, the process starts with observation. Staff monitor conduct, mental health, and adjustment. Reports are written. Reviews are scheduled. The emphasis is on predictability and safety. Daily life remains structured. Meals continue to arrive through the slot. Recreation is scheduled and supervised. Programs may be provided through secure delivery methods. Medical and mental health appointments occur as needed. In this environment, progress depends less on dramatic change and more on consistent routine. Psychologically, this stage can be challenging. The person understands the rules, grasps the limits of communication, and now faces the long horizon of time. Motivation becomes internal. Many rely on small personal routines, exercise, reading, writing, religious practice, or education materials to create meaning and rhythm inside a highly controlled space. Mental health services play an important role here. Over the years, policy changes and legal agreements have strengthened screening and treatment for people with serious mental health needs. Clinicians assess risk, provide therapy where appropriate, and monitor those who show signs of declining mental health. The institution must maintain security while also meeting legal and ethical standards of care. From a system perspective, this period shows both the intent and the controversy of ADX. The intent is safety, to prevent violence, stop escape attempts, and control individuals who previously posed significant risks in other prisons. The controversy centers on the psychological impact of long-term isolation and the pace of movement through less restrictive settings. Courts, inspectors, and human rights groups have continued to examine these questions, influencing policy over time. For the person inside, the reality is simpler and more personal. Each review becomes a milestone. Each rule followed is a step toward potential change. Each infraction, even a small one, can slow progress. The first meal signaled control. The step-down system now turns control into a long-term test of behavior and endurance. A critical turning point appears when the individual receives their first formal review result. It may confirm progress. It may say no change. It may set new requirements. Whatever the outcome, it shapes expectations for the years ahead. The open question remains: will routine, structure, and support lead to gradual transition to less restrictive conditions, or will the person remain in the same unit, facing the same tray slot, waiting for another review months later? As life at ADX Florence settles into routine, attention shifts from first impressions to long-term well-being. The first meal and the first night introduce structure. The following months reveal how closely health, both physical and psychological, is monitored inside such a restricted environment. Medical care at ADX follows federal prison policy. New arrivals are evaluated during intake and continue to be seen through scheduled appointments, sick call requests, and emergency procedures when necessary. Chronic conditions such as diabetes, heart disease, or other long-term illnesses are managed through treatment plans, medication, and follow-up visits. These processes are documented and audited, reflecting legal requirements that correctional institutions provide adequate health care. Mental health observation is particularly important in a high-security setting. Clinicians conduct screenings, assess risk levels, and respond to signs of distress. Over time, lawsuits, Department of Justice reviews, and policy changes have strengthened mental health services at ADX, especially for individuals with serious psychiatric diagnoses. Structured treatment units and specialized staff are intended to reduce harm and provide care while still maintaining security. The environment itself affects how health is experienced. Time alone means fewer everyday distractions and more time spent with one's own thoughts. For some individuals, this increases self-reflection and routine building. For others, it can contribute to anxiety, difficulty concentrating, or depression. Research on long-term isolation shows mixed outcomes, but it clearly indicates that strong support systems, regular monitoring, and meaningful activity reduce negative effects. Inside ADX, those activities are limited but present. Reading materials, approved education courses delivered through controlled systems, religious services provided through secure means, and structured exercise routines all become key elements of daily life. These are not luxuries. They function as tools for stability. Staff are trained to observe behavior as part of safety. Changes in sleep, appetite, communication, or demeanor can trigger closer review. This oversight reflects the dual mission of the institution, preventing harm while enforcing rules designed for the highest-risk federal prisoners. For the person inside, this ongoing observation can feel both protective and restrictive. It provides access to care, but also constant evaluation. Every decision, how they respond to instructions, whether they follow rules consistently, how they manage stress, becomes part of their record. The human impact is measured quietly. Letters may come less often than hoped. Reviews may move slower than expected. Progress through the step-down system requires patience that is sometimes measured in years rather than months. The first meal marked the beginning of controlled living. By this stage, the deeper question becomes how to sustain identity, motivation, and mental balance inside such a system. A key turning point arrives when an individual recognizes that adaptation is not about changing the prison, but about adjusting personal expectations and strategies. Some build firm routines. Some rely on outside support. Some lean on education or faith. Others continue to struggle despite available programs. The unresolved question persists. How will long-term confinement in such a controlled environment shape the person who eventually leaves that cell, whether to a different unit, to another facility, or simply into another year at ADX? With months turning into years, the first meal at ADX Florence becomes a memory, but remains symbolic. It represents the moment when life shifted from one system to another, from movement and interaction to an environment defined by routine, separation, and control. Time inside ADX is structured but also repetitive. The rhythm rarely changes. Meals through the slot, scheduled counts, limited recreation, monitored communication, periodic reviews. This repetition is intentional. It reduces unpredictability and lowers the chance of conflict. But it also requires each person to construct their own meaning within a narrow framework. Identity inside such confinement is shaped by personal routine, communication with approved outside contacts, participation in available programs, progress in the step-down system. The system emphasizes responsibility for behavior. Reviews continue to evaluate conduct, mental health, and security risk. For some individuals, consistent compliance leads to gradual transition to less restrictive conditions. For others, infractions or ongoing security concerns result in long stays under the same highly controlled conditions. From a psychological perspective, how someone interprets that first meal helps predict their adjustment. If it is seen only as loss, the environment may feel overwhelming. If it is understood as the start of a structured and rule-bound process with possible stages of improvement, coping strategies are often stronger. Neither reaction is unusual. Both reflect the reality of a place built around maximum control. From a system perspective, ADX continues to be reviewed, debated, and monitored by courts, journalists, scholars, and government agencies. Policies evolve, especially around mental health treatment and step-down procedures. But the core design, separation, routine, and strict supervision, remains central to its mission. The first meal inside ADX Florence is therefore more than a single event. It marks the beginning of a long test. How a human being adapts to one of the most controlled correctional environments in the United States, and how the institution balances safety, law, and human impact. The unanswered question that carries forward is simple but significant. After years of routine shaped by that first day, who does a person become? And what does that say about the power of environment, policy, and time? Psychological and system analysis. Final section. ADX Florence represents an extreme end of the correctional spectrum. It was built to manage individuals who posed serious security risks in other prisons, including violence, escape attempts, or coordination of criminal activity from behind bars. Its procedures, from the first meal to long-term housing, are designed to minimize those risks. Psychologically, several key dynamics define life there. Isolation and structure. Long hours alone increase reliance on internal coping skills. Structure stabilizes routine but limits stimulation. Behavioral incentives. The step-down process ties privileges to rule following, encouraging self-control but requiring patience and emotional regulation. Health monitoring. Mental and physical health services are essential in detecting stress, depression, or other conditions, especially in early months. Identity reshaping. With few external roles available, people often redefine themselves through reading, exercise, faith, or correspondence. Systemically, ADX functions within strict legal frameworks. Federal regulations on conditions of confinement. Constitutional protections around communication and religion. Court oversight concerning mental health treatment. Internal Bureau of Prisons policy reviews. Supporters argue that the prison prevents harm and protects staff and inmates across the federal system. Critics express concern about psychological effects of prolonged isolation. Both perspectives continue to influence policy discussions, court rulings, and reforms. The first meal is the clearest introduction to that system. It is ordinary food delivered in an extraordinary environment. It tells the new arrival that control, predictability, and separation are now daily realities. The story of the first meal at ADX Florence is not about the food itself. It is about how life begins inside a facility designed for absolute security. It shows how a system built to prevent violence relies on structure, separation, and slow, conditional progress. It also reminds us that behind policies and architecture are human beings living within those rules. Understanding how ADX operates helps the public discuss prisons with clarity rather than myth, recognizing both the goals of safety and the challenges of long-term isolation. It raises important questions about law, mental health, public protection, and the future of high-security incarceration. If you found this documentary informative and would like to learn more about the realities behind prison systems and criminal justice, consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing your thoughts respectfully in the comments.